Well, it's official. Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bavino is no longer in Chicago. He revealed today he's actually in West Virginia right now, training for a new deployment, but says Chicagoans shouldn't buy into the media reports that Operation Midway Blitz is scaling back without their controversial leader.
We're ratcheting operations up in Chicago. And let me tell you a little bit. My team and I have spent 2 months in Chicago. What's happening there is it's beyond the pale. That's a very corrupt system in Chicago, whether it's those elected leaders like Pritzker or those out of control judges. Chicago needs some attention. We're not going anywhere out of Chicago.
Now, Governor Pritzker says it's Bavino himself whose actions have been beyond the pale. Bavino has taken to over the air and social media to blast everything from the governor's policies to his physical appearance. Pritzker's goodbye message can be summed up in 2 words: good riddance.
I am not confident, I'll be honest with you, that we're going to see peace in our neighborhoods now. I think there are just fewer agents, and that will probably ratchet it down to some degree. But I think unless they change their tactics, they're going to end up in court again and again and again and being ordered to ratchet down the violence that they're visiting on the people of the city of Chicago.
Now, Bavino says Operation Midway Blitz has been a huge success. He and DHS officials claim to have detained or deported 5,000 people, the majority of which they say are criminal undocumented immigrants. But what is Bavino's short 2-month legacy leading operations in Illinois really going to look like? For starters, it's this: the aggressive use of tear gas and munitions as crowd control measures used over and over again in densely populated neighborhoods like Old Irving Park when kids were present and safety threats to officers were virtually non-existent. Or it's the endless stories of Border Patrol agents walking up to day laborers, landscapers, painters, and others asking for papers based on some sort of probable cause. Bavino claims it wasn't racial profiling. And then there's the September 30th raid in South Shore where agents created a virtual war zone, rappelling from Black Hawk helicopters, tearing apart apartments, and detaining U.S. citizens for a period of time, all because they said there were dangerous criminal gang members there. But new reporting from ProPublica today suggests they didn't capture a single gang member. And of course, there's the showmanship. The agents following Bavino with cameras and microphones, documenting every move and almost instantly putting out Hollywood-style hype videos on social media. Last but not least, it's the court cases and rulings finding that Bavino and his crews operated wildly outside the bounds of the law, violating a consent decree, use of force that, quote, shocked the conscience, according to federal judge Sarah Ellis. Hundreds and hundreds of those 5,000 detained have been ordered released by a federal judge, if they can even be located. And multiple reports indicated the Trump administration sent Bavino to Chicago because he would do what longtime ICE officials would not. ICE, who deported records amounts during the Obama administration, they wanted to stick with what they know best: targeted raids, the worst of the worst. Not Bavino. He was willing to go into the Home Depots and the Sam's Clubs. He's willing to provide the volume that the Trump administration craved. And he was willing to cause chaos and film every second of it for great social media content. My guess is we'll spend weeks and months untangling the legal and operational mess Bavino leaves behind for ICE to clean up, even though Bavino says he isn't done with Chicago quite yet. Tonight, the stunning September raid on a South Shore apartment building was supposed to have netted criminals and gang members. But a bombshell new investigation shows it did not do that. The federal government's back open, but when will air travel get back to normal? Chicago's bustling, intoxicating hemp industry dealt a major blow as the federal government bans products like Delta 8 and 9 weed. And Chicagoans who stayed up late and looked up at the sky got quite a show. Will the show go on? And welcome to the Chicago Report. I'm Paris Schutz. Retiring 4th Congressional District Representative Jesus Chuy Garcia, he's getting a lot of pushback within his own party. Last night, Washington Democratic Congresswoman Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez offered a resolution scolding Garcia for the sneaky way he bowed out of re-election right at the deadline to turn in nominating petitions, leaving his chief of staff, Patty Garcia, as the lone Democratic candidate.
Whereas Representative Garcia's actions are beneath the dignity of his office and incompatible with the spirit of the Constitution. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the House of Representatives disapproves of the behavior of the representative from Illinois, Mr. Garcia.
Now, some of Garcia's Illinois allies rose to his defense, praising his career as a progressive fighter. Garcia's office issued a statement after the blistering takedown saying, quote, Congressman Garcia made a deeply personal decision based on his health, his wife's worsening condition, and his responsibility to the grandchildren he is raising after the death of his daughter. He followed every rule and every filing requirement laid out by the state of Illinois. Who could forget the high-octane raid of a South Shore apartment around midnight in late September? It featured federal immigration agents rappelling from Black Hawk helicopters, marauding through apartments and hallways, zip-tying and temporarily detaining American citizens, and filming all of it. Now, the Trump administration claimed the operation nabbed suspected gang members and criminal undocumented immigrants, but a new investigation from ProPublica pulls back the curtain. Not a single known suspect has been charged with any crimes, that article finds, and not a single suspect is documented to be a gang member. And joining us now is one of the story's reporters, Melissa Sanchez. Hi, Melissa. Thanks for joining us. First, remind us, some of the first-person accounts of what happened that night.
Sure. So we were able to interview 12 of the Venezuelan men and women who were detained that night. The government said that 37 immigrants were detained. We identified 21 of them. And what the 12 people who we spoke to told us about was getting woken up in the middle of the night with booms as doors were being broken down, their own doors or their neighbors' doors. They heard the helicopter. Some shared audio with us of WhatsApp messages that they were sending at that time, where you could actually hear families screaming. You could hear helicopters in the background, flash grenades, smoke, etc. And all of the families told us, all the people we spoke to, that that agents kind of barged into their apartments, detained the men, zip-tied them, and then kind of shuffled them outside where they were questioned.
And then Stephen Miller and other members of the Trump administration immediately claimed that this was a big success, that they'd made the community safer. They had taken suspected gang members from Venezuela and criminal undocumented immigrants. But what did your reporting find?
So we wanted to see if that was true, and we looked at the criminal records of all of the people we could identify. Of course, we've reached out to the government. We asked them for the names of all the people who were arrested, and they just refused to provide any information. But the people we were able to identify, we pulled their criminal records in the U.S. and what we could find in Latin America. And 18 of the 21 people who we identified had no criminal convictions in the U.S. that we could find. 3 did have convictions, ranging from shoplifting to like a domestic violence case, and there was one with an open gun case that that's still pending in court. But none of those records showed showed membership in a gang. In one of the cases, the police, Chicago police, had actually run a guy through the different systems and said that there was no indication that he was a member of a gang. And kind of like, just to add on to that, we also watched these guys in court. Most of them have gone to immigration court after their detention, where they're asking for their deportation, or they're being given what's called a voluntary departure. And in court, we have not heard government prosecutors say anything about gang membership or about about their crimes. And in fact, the kind of deportation a lot of them are getting is the kind that's given to good immigrants who are then able to reapply to come back to the U.S. So all of this shows to us, like, if there were gang members, like, we just haven't seen any evidence of that yet.
So it's amazing. This is a common theme here. They do make claims, this administration and the public, but then when they go to court, sometimes the story just completely changes. And as I read from your report, nobody that was detained in this raid was charged with any kind of criminal action. They were just all put into deportation proceedings, correct?
That's right. And what former prosecutors have told us is that shows to them that if they had a good case against somebody, they would make it. They would make a point of that. But instead, they're just deporting people. And I mean, like, most of the guys have already been deported, or their wives and kids. And so it just begs the question of what was the point of all of this? I mean, was it a big success? We talked to, I don't know, a half dozen of the immigrants told us that people also escaped. Like, if it was a big success, like some of them got away. It's just unclear whether what the government is saying is true.
Well, one could argue that because of how aggressively they marketed the videos of this, they were hype videos, they look like movies. Perhaps that was one of the reasons that they went to such extent to perform a raid like this. But you talked to some of the members that have been deported back to Venezuela. What is their life like now, and do they wish that they were still in the United States?
I mean, they do. They would be afraid to be here, but they're also not happy back in Venezuela. It's a country that they had fled years ago, many of them, because the economy has collapsed. It's got an authoritarian government. There's not a lot of options for them down there. But it's interesting about the cameras, about the TV crews that were there filming this whole thing. Almost every single Venezuelan I talked to brought up those cameras. Some of them told me they thought they were there to document ISIS abuse, but and they've been really frustrated that the cameras, the footage never showed any of the women or the kids who were taken that night, and there were dozens of women and kids taken that night.
And we know that despite the relative success or failure or whatever was accomplished in this raid, this apartment complex had problems for a long period of time. Talk about the conditions that had existed there.
Yeah, I mean, and the conditions that still exist today, the building's dilapidated. It's not cared for. The elevators don't work, and there's people on the third floor who don't have any legs and who are stuck on that floor still. I mean, the place smells like urine, and there's like little animals and insects everywhere. That's kind of like the building conditions. But also, there's a lot of drug use. Venezuelans and African American tenants who were there told me about seeing some young men, both African American and Venezuelan, walking around with guns. There were a high volume of calls to police made from that building. There was a murder there over the summer involving a Venezuelan tenant who got shot allegedly by a couple of Venezuelan men. So there were definitely problems at that building, like in a lot of buildings in Chicago.
And Melissa, what was the response from DHS to your findings in this story?
Well, unfortunately, the government did not respond to our detailed questions with answers. They provided a stock statement that talked about how they arrested 2 gang members without providing any evidence. They said that they could not provide any of the evidence because that could affect their sourcing, and that wasn't something they were going to do for our story. They said that they followed all the laws.
All right, Melissa Sanchez, it's an incredible investigative piece in ProPublica out today about that raid in South Shore and what the government had claimed about it, but what appears to be actually true about it, and the two things do not seem to jibe at all. Great reporting, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And up next, will air travel return to normal before the dreaded Thanksgiving travel weekend? Stay with us.